Well, good afternoon. Hello and welcome. We're very pleased that you're here with us today to recognize and note the commemoration of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. I'm Susan Summers, and I'm here representing the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, founder of World Elder Abuse Day, Awareness Day, back in 2006. And I'd like to start the program by introducing the Honorable Ambassador Scaff, Permanent Representative of Argentina to the United Nations at New York, and Chair of the General Assembly's Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, and a friend for 75 years. Argentina has been our friend of older persons' rights. So thank you. Ambassador, I give it to you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is an honor for me to open this event on the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which was established by the General Assembly in 2011 through Resolution 66/127. I would like to begin my speech with a warm and affectionate greetings to the older person from all over the world, especially those who are victims of violence and abuse. I want to let them know that they are not alone in the fight against violence and abuse. We are with them, with our support and commitment to stop those abuses and increasing our efforts in promoting and protecting the full enjoyment of their human rights. According to estimates from the World Health Organization, 1 in 6 people over the age of 60 suffer some type of abuse. That means almost 141 million people around the world. It's a lot of. This number could be much higher as violence, abuse, and neglect of older persons are the most hidden and underreported human rights violations. These abuses can lead to serious physical injuries and prolonged psychological consequences. Today, and following the title of this year commemoration, which addresses the gender-based violence in older age, I would like to focus particularly on the situation of violence, abuse, and lack of recognition suffered by older women, the invisible ones. They are historically left behind in policy-making decisions at national, regional, and international levels. There are millions of older women that day after day are faced with the structural inequalities aggravated by the intersection of age and gender. According to the United Nations World Population Prospects 2022, women outnumber men at older ages in almost all populations. Globally, women comprise 55.7% of persons aged 65 or older, and their share is projected to decline to 54.5% in 2050. Despite these worldwide trends, older women have historically been overlooked in the discussion held in different international fora. The intersection of age and gender results in older women experiencing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and inequality throughout their lifetime. They face economic insecurity to a greater extent than the older men and they are more vulnerable to violence, abuse, and social exclusion. In Argentina, my country, the National Institute of Social Services for Retirees and Pensioners, PAMI is the acronym, is opened in December 2021 the first Center for Comprehensive Protection for Women and Diversities. The name of the center is Eva Schiverti. It's a very, very new in my country. Women fight a lot for the right of the older person and the situation of the women. The center is innovative in Latin America, and it focuses on care in situations of gender-based violence in older age, addressing cases in an interdisciplinary and intersectional way. Despite the challenges faced by older women, they are a pillar of our societies. While older persons are often described as dependent and recipients of care, many older women actually provide unpaid care, work to the other older person and family members, and this often goes unrecognized. During the COVID-19 pandemic, more than half an older women, 57%, aged 60 years or more, reported increased time spent on unpaid care and domestic work. In many countries, grandparents and especially grandmothers play a crucial role in allowing their sons and daughters to work by providing support in the care of their grandchildren. The international human rights and policy frameworks promote and protect human rights. However, the absence of a specific convention on the right of older persons results in gaps in the protection of older women as a distinct group. The existence of such gaps in the international human rights framework is one of the main reasons older persons, and in particular older women, remain overlooked in policy-making decisions. Hence, I wish to emphasize that the need for an international legal instrument on the human rights of older persons is undeniable. Indeed, for the first time, in the last review of an evaluation of the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging, all regions reported that some governments and NGOs mentioned the development of an international legal instrument. This is significant progress, although this report varies between and within regions. It's not similar for all the regions. There are differences. Really, sometimes very important differences within regions. In this sense, the open-ended working group on aging, which I have the honor and responsibility to chair, has a crucial role as the main multilateral platform, since this is the only body in the United Nations system specifically devoted to addressing the challenges faced by older persons. At the 13th session of the open-ended working group this last April, Decision 13/1 was approved. According to its provision, one as a chair of the working group appointing the permanent representative of Portugal and Brazil as co-facilitators to conduct open, transparent, and inclusive informal intergovernmental meeting between the 13th and 14th session of the working group to identify possible gaps in the protection of the human rights of older persons and how best to address them. This process represents a great opportunity to advance in obtaining for the first time an intergovernmental document on the gaps in the protection of the human rights of older persons and how best to address them. In closing, I would like to acknowledge the efforts made to commemorate this International Day, which allow us to reflect on the violence and abuse suffered by older people. Thus, I wish to reiterate our commitment to continue working in the promotion of the United Nations agenda to improve the system for protecting the right of older persons, which is, in the end, the right of all people in the future. As it was clearly stated by the great Nelson Mandela. He said, a society that does not value its older people denies its roots and endangers its future. Really, I believe it's very important to work for the next session, and it's very important work of a co-chair, especially the working group for advance in our address. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for Argentina's support for older persons' human rights and for this important scene setting for our time here today. Those intersectionalities between older age and gender are really crucial to keep in mind as we continue to explore this. Well, I am Bethany Brown with the Program on Aging here at DESA, and I am pleased to welcome all of you who are here in the room and also everyone who is joining us online to this important commemoration today. With sincere apologies to those of us gathered here in the room, we will have to change our agenda a little bit and end promptly after the independent expert delivers her address at the end of the program. We were informed of an unavoidable scheduling conflict for the room. So with that, we'll start with some short keynotes from the UN system, and it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Julia Ferrer from the Program on Aging section of UNDESA. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany, Ambassador. It is a pleasure to be here with you in the celebration of this very important day. Today, I want to talk very briefly about the main findings of the fourth review and appraisal of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, MIPA for short, on elder abuse and violence against older women. The process of review and appraisal of MIPA that we finalized at the global level early this year follows a bottom-up approach that goes from the national to the regional to the global level, and it involves different stakeholders, so it provides us with invaluable information on what is happening at the national level and what are the different priorities of member states when it comes to population aging, older persons, and in this case, elder abuse. In MIPA itself, which was adopted in 2002, member states clearly recognized and highlighted that older women face greater risk of physical and psychological abuse as a result of lifelong gender-based discrimination. They also linked their abuse to the fact that women are more likely to experience poverty in old age than men. The data from the fourth review and appraisal show that there are great variations between and within regions, as the ambassador said, on the extent to which member states are committed to combat elder abuse and on the focus of their actions. I'm going to share with you some of the main areas where member states are working to end elder abuse, but I think it is important to say on the onset that while the MIPA fourth review and appraisal shows progress, it also shows that progress is slow, and unfortunately, in most countries, there is not a systematic approach to address elder abuse and violence against older women. That being said, a majority of actions by member states are around 5 main areas. Firstly, the adoption or strengthening of legislations and policies, which are often in the context of domestic violence in general, so they're not targeted to older persons. Some countries are even reporting that legislation on violence against women also protects older women from abuse and violence. Mechanisms such as helplines and centers for victims of abuse, as well as mechanisms to report abuse and violence, again tend to be addressed to vulnerable groups older persons are identified as one vulnerable group, but they're not specifically targeted to older persons or older women. Thirdly, capacity building and training among professionals who come in contact with older persons in their work or with caregivers to prevent and also to detect elder abuse specifically, or abuse and violence in family settings more generally. Another important area of work is public awareness raising campaigns that address abuse and violence in the family. And in this case, we do find more examples of countries that are putting together campaigns that focus on abuse, elder abuse, or discrimination against older persons. Finally, data. We know that when there is no data, violence goes undetected. Many countries, particularly in Latin America, report progress on including the issue of discrimination and abuse in surveys so that they can better understand prevalence. As I said before, there is progress, but progress is slow. So I want to leave you today with some of the issues that regional MIPA reviews and appraisals reports identify as critical to combat elder abuse and violence against older women at the national level. Data. We need more and better data on abuse and violence that is disaggregated by age, gender, and any other relevant ground. We need dedicated, targeted legal protections and redress mechanisms for elder abuse. We need more targeted capacity building. We need more awareness among policymakers as well as among the general public. And finally, we need more resources to make sure that legislation and policy is translated into reality. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Really, there's so much variety in what's happening around the world around MIPA, and thank you for the work that you and your team have done to put this together for us. It's my pleasure to next invite Rio Hada from OHCHR's New York office, who's the Chief Equality, Development, and Rule of Law section, to share with us some thoughts.
Thank you, Bethany, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Our event today is part of our collaboration under the UN Decade of Healthy Aging, and also links to the Human Rights 75 campaign that OHCHR has launched to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights this year. In this month of June, the HR 75 is putting a spotlight on women's rights, in particular on the key obstacles to women's participation in decision-making, which is fundamental to women's empowerment and the realization of all human rights. And gender-based violence is one of those serious obstacles. Not only it is a human rights violation, but it also being used as a means to exercise control over women and girls that perpetuate their disempowered status in society. So let's look at how gender-based violence and discrimination intersect with older age. In many places of the world, older women face cumulative effects of gender discrimination throughout their lives. This combination of age and gender discrimination puts older women at particular risk of violence and abuse, both at home and at institutions that lead to physical injury, severe emotional trauma, long-term health problems, loss of independence, and accelerated death. Yet, as Julia mentioned, this remains one of the most hidden, underreported problems. Dependence on others for care, medicine, food, financial, and other support often prevents older women from speaking out and seeking help. And existing protective mechanisms are often inadequate and not responsive to the needs of older women. And let me focus on one of the 5 priorities for combating elder abuse that developed under the UN Decade of Healthy Aging last year. That is on ageism, which constitutes a major risk factor for abuse of older people. Ageism is frequently a principal cause of human rights violations based on older age. Ageism also prevents us from raising elder abuse as a priority issue at national and global levels and enacting necessary legal and policy framework in place. In the International Human Rights Framework, there's no explicit standards on ageism, and no explicit obligation on states to take active measures to eliminate ageism and its discriminatory consequences. And this is a significant gap. The existing international human rights framework provides fragmented and inconsistent coverage of the human rights of older persons in law and in practice. And although existing treaties apply to some of the forms of violence, neglect, and abuse, there's no explicit reference to the specific situation of older persons. Only a fraction of concluding observations adopted by CEDAW or other treaty bodies explicitly address violence against older women. Standards at the national level are often weak, fragmented, or absent altogether. So I'd like to put forward 3 thoughts. First, we must address ageism that is at the root of elder abuse among perpetrators, victims, and bystanders. Elder abuse is a serious violation of human rights. It is not acceptable to turn blind eyes. Second, we need better understanding of gendered power imbalances as factors behind violence, abuse, and neglect of older persons. And third, we need to ensure the systematic, meaningful, and effective participation of older women in policy dialogues and in all aspects of our life as active agents of change. The limitation of existing instruments can hinder the effective protection of older women, including against violence, neglect, and abuse. So it is important that we all contribute to the work of the General Assembly's Open-Ended Working Group on Aging that Ambassador Squeff chairs, towards developing a dedicated international instrument on the human rights of older persons. I invite all of you to take part in our Human Rights 75 campaign. Your voice, positive impact stories, and commitment will help to define a new vision for human rights in our aging world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rio, for sharing with us about the current survey of existing frameworks and for highlighting both the power differentials that go into violence and abuse against older women and also their participation. Next, I'd like to turn to Christopher Micton, who's joining us virtually. He is a technical officer on demographic change in the Healthy Aging Unit at the WHO. Christopher, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, as Rio just reminded us, last year on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, the World Health Organization, along with other UN agencies and other partners, launched the document Tackling Abuse of Older People, 5 Priorities for the United Nations Decade of Healthy Aging. And the 5 priorities we identified in this document were, as Rio just mentioned, the first one is combating ageism, a major risk factor for the abuse of older people, and also one of the main reasons the abuse of older people does not receive more attention. One of the main reasons it's not more of a priority. Second priority is to generate more and better data, especially on the prevalence of the abuse of older people. We have some data, but we know that they're by and large of relatively low quality, and more and better data on risk and protective factors for the abuse of older people. Third priority is to develop and scale up effective interventions. There's a general consensus in the field based on multiple systematic reviews that have been done that to date there are almost no interventions that have been demonstrated to be effective in high quality evaluations. The fourth priority identified in this document is to make an investment case for addressing the abuse of older people. And the last priority is to raise funds to address these priorities and to tackle the issue more generally. Since the launch of this document a year ago, we've been busy working on addressing 2 of these priorities. The first one is generating more and better data. What we've been doing is completing an evidence and gap map on all aspects of the abuse of older people, including prevalence, consequences, risk and protective factors, and interventions. We've identified 111 systematic reviews which include about 1,500 single studies in this evidence and gap map, and then we map it and organize it as an interactive map. Projects has included about 20 people working in 5 different institutions around the world and should be released later this summer. Second thing we've been doing to generate more and better data on prevalence and risk and protective factors is working with colleagues at the University of Malaya. We've been doing a systematic review of the measurement quality of instruments to measure the prevalence of older people. And this with a view to developing a new and better instrument that will more reliably and validly measure the abuse of older people, and then to do a series of multi-country studies to get a better sense of what the true prevalence of elder abuse is. Second priority we've been addressing is developing and scaling up cost-effective solutions. WHO has established and received funding for what we're calling an intervention accelerator. This is a multi-year project. Imagine it's a 5, maybe 10-year project. And the aim is to develop a portfolio of effective intervention approaches to prevent and respond to the abuse of older people in both community and in institutional settings in low, middle, and high-income countries. And the intervention accelerator includes, at the moment, 10 core members from 8 different countries, including Burkina Faso, Iran, Malaysia, Canada, the US, as well as Professor Elsie Yan, who's here, who's going to tell us a little bit more about this intervention accelerator in a moment. So although we don't have any major announcements to make, we've been busily working away at trying to address these priorities. And all of them, even though they don't necessarily focus exclusively on violence against older women or gender-based violence, all include violence against women. So that's my update on the addressing of these priorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher. We'll look forward to continuing to hear more about the WHO's important studies in this area. Next in our program, I would like to turn the floor over to Claudia Garcia Moreno, who is also joining us virtually. She's the unit head of the Addressing the Needs of Populations in Vulnerable Situations section of the Department of Sexual and Reproductive Health of the WHO. And she has some really interesting updates about a new survey module to share with us. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, good evening. I think several of the speakers, starting with Bethany, have already highlighted the limitations of some of the data that we currently have on violence against women and the need for more and better data that is disaggregated by a range of factors. And so in the process of producing the global, regional, and national estimates on intimate partner violence and sexual violence in particular, we have continued to get whatever data is available and look at it disaggregated by age. And as we were aware already in the previous round of estimates, the data for availability of data for older women is limited, particularly from low and middle income countries. And this is because a lot of the data that we have comes from the inclusion of a set of questions or modules in surveys that are specifically designed around reproductive health. And so they are focused on women of reproductive age 15 to 49. We do also have a growing number of national violence against women surveys that are including older women, women 50 and above, but do not necessarily disaggregate the data by these age groups, do not necessarily, and I would say usually, do not capture forms of violence or different perpetrators that may be specifically important for violence against older women. And so following a review, both a quantitative review of the existing prevalence issues and a scoping review of qualitative data on what we know about, particularly these two forms of violence against women, and discussions with experts and reviewing with Chris, who has just presented, reviewing what instruments are being used, both for elder abuse surveys. And there, the challenge is that even where the data is available, it's not always reported or presented disaggregated by sex. We identified what were some of the domains in the dynamics of violence that may be specific to older women that are not being captured by our current surveys. And on the basis of these discussions, we've developed a module, which I hope will be available very soon for sharing more widely, that aims to capture these forms of violence that are specific to women 60 and older, and that would be for inclusion in violence against women surveys. The module addresses some of the challenges, obviously the lack of data on prevalence, but as Chris mentioned, it's also, we need to know more about the dynamics and the patterns of different forms of abuse, and particularly how these patterns may change as we transition into older age. Data that can inform our understanding of some of the risk and protective factors of different forms of exposure and the cumulative impacts of these different forms of violence that women are exposed to over the long of their lives. So basically, this module is envisaged not to stand alone, but it's really envisaged to complement the questions that are already included in violence against women surveys, but to capture some of these specifics. We have also made some recommendations. We have also, we are finalizing a briefing note that makes recommendations on how to strengthen the availability, the measurement, and the quality of data. And I should have mentioned from the beginning that this is part of a larger program of work that we have been implementing jointly with UN Women over the past 5 years to strengthen the measurement and the availability and use of data on violence against women. So we have made recommendations, for example, around the importance of disaggregating data, certainly by age ranges. So even if even if violence against women over 60 is included, sometimes the upper age limit can be 70, sometimes there's no upper age limit, but the data is just not disaggregated, which doesn't really allow us to understand the different patterns. Expanding the types of violence that are being included, and particularly some of the forms around neglect, limitation of mobility, access to medications or to specific appliances, financial abuse, etc. Looking at different types of perpetrators beyond intimate partners, including caregivers, including adult children. There is a need for also more, as we start to do more cognitive testing and piloting of this module, obviously we expect that it will be improved and strengthened, and we will need more testing to ensure that it is sturdy in terms of psychometric properties. And we really also see that there is a need for research that not only expands the age limit, but captures the different types of violence, that explores associations between the histories of violence, and that addresses some of these methodological limitations. And we're very happy to share the module, and particularly for anyone who's interested in using it and providing input in terms of its reach? Is it capturing everything that we should be capturing? Are there gaps? And is it valid and providing us with the right information? So look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for sharing about your exciting work. And it's a privilege to have the chance to hear about such technical work broken down in a way that's pretty easy to understand. Before I let you go, can I just ask you quickly to share where others might find you to find out more about your work?
Yes. So the generic address is, well, I'll put it in the chat. Would that be easier? I'll put the generic address for our department and then names of different people, including myself, that you can follow up with. And hopefully we'll share the briefing note and the module with the organizers so that it can be disseminated also through DESA and other participants.
Yes, anyone should feel free to be in touch with DESA to find out more about this work. And I'll take a pause here before we move on to the next speaker to remind those of you who are online and those of you who are in the room that we do have a hashtag for this day. It's hashtag WEAAD 2030 World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. 2023, I'm imagining that actually is. And so far we have over 2,900 tweets just today and a reach of nearly 10 million. So thank you to everyone who has been involved with this at the local level, at the national level, through the celebrations and commemorations that are going on around the world. It's great to be a part of the community of people that are working on these issues. And with that, I'll move on to introduce Elsie Yan. She's here with us from the Department of Applied Sciences at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. She's joining us virtually. Elsie, thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Bethany, for the very kind introduction. And my name is Elsie Yan, and I'm a faculty member at the Department of Applied Social Sciences, Hong Kong Polytechnic University. And today, on behalf of my esteemed colleagues, I am going to update colleagues on the establishment of the Intervention Accelerator to Prevent Elder Abuse. I do not need to repeat what we all know, like the high prevalence of elder abuse, and that is very serious consequences on victims, families, and the society at large. And with the global aging population, there is a pressing need to speed up development and evaluation of effective intervention for elder abuse. So the WHO has conducted a mega map of systematic reviews on elder abuse earlier. And then obviously there is a pressing need, there is an imminent need to develop effective interventions. And as colleagues mentioned earlier, development and scaling up of cost-effective intervention to stop abuse of older persons appear as one of the 5 top priorities to tackle abuse of older persons. And then we also observe that abuse is prevalent in a community as it is in institutions, and that the pandemic has changed the rates and the models of handling elder abuse. So the goal of the Intervention Accelerator, as Chris has mentioned earlier, is to develop a portfolio of effective intervention approaches supported by high-quality evidence ready to be scaled up to prevent and respond to elder abuse in both community and institution setting in low, middle, and high-income countries. So we have a large team led by Chris from WHO. And then we have, I'm sure there are lots of familiar faces to colleagues on this slide. So we have colleagues from across the globe to join this project. We're very pleased about that. And we are using a step-by-step approach. First off, to identify, screen, and create a database of candidate interventions. And then we wish to engage an international network to refine, adapt, and test these intervention approaches. And following that, we will refine, adapt, and test these intervention approaches in single and multi-site studies to collect more evidence on the effectiveness of these interventions. Eventually, the goal is to develop a portfolio of intervention approaches to be created, to be maintained on WHO website. And hopefully, these interventions proven to be effective will be adopted and used in different countries and societies. Right now, we are at step 1. And regarding project progress, we have identified promising interventions among the 200 plus primary studies from 19 countries included in the megamap. As we are aware, different countries, different societies are at very different stages of research and intervention for elder abuse. So we feel it would be meaningful to compare the interventions in developing countries, looking at the contextual effect. And then to supplement to what we find in the megamap, we are also doing a review of primary studies published between 2013 and 2023. So right now, the review of studies published between 2019 and 23 has been completed. Among the 19,000 studies, we have identified 269 studies that involve primary, secondary, and tertiary interventions. And for primary interventions, we're looking at policies on elder abuse prevention, education program, etc. And for secondary interventions, there are screening and detection tools that is very important, reporting plans, systems, etc. And for tertiary interventions, there are mainly counseling services for abused adults, treatment addressing depression and other psychological symptoms. The review of studies published between 2013 and 2019 is still ongoing. So we have 16,000 entries, and after eliminating duplicated records, it comes down to a little bit less than 7,000. And in conducting this review, we will also include great literature published between 2013 and 2023 to add on to what we have done. And we are aware that colleagues are actively developing, evaluating interventions that may or may not appear in the literature yet. So we will roll out an international call for promising interventions to prevent elder abuse through various communication channels. And we hope that colleagues will look out for that. We'll disseminate this call on platforms for healthy aging, on the team's personal, professional, and research networks, and on social media channels, etc. So please do respond to the call. I have included email of Chris, Lara, and myself on the slides, but please reach out to any colleagues on the team. And that's the end of my sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elsie, for sharing about this great work and the opportunity for listeners to get in on the ground floors as you're just beginning. I forgot to mention that you're also a representative for the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, which is another really important hat to wear. So thank you again. And now it's my pleasure to turn the floor to Claudia Mahler, the independent expert on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons. She'll be joining us virtually. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bethany, and have a nice afternoon and nice evening. I greet you from Geneva. And as I always do, I really would like to thank the organizers for their kind invitation. And I think it's really crucial to have this event, and I'm really honored to participate at this World Elder Abuse Awareness Day 2023. After so many years of recognition of this International Day, older persons and especially older women still face a high risk that their human rights are violated. We are all aware that violence, abuse, and neglect is one of the most underreported crimes, as mentioned before, and out of many different reasons, they are underreported. From my perspective, the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day is the perfect occasion to once again raise awareness that the protection of the human rights of older women is still not sufficient, and we need to join forces for today. I was invited to speak today on older women deprived of liberty, an issue I tackled in my report on older persons deprived of liberty, which was presented to the Human Rights Council last year. I would also like to raise awareness to my report on older women, which I presented to the General Assembly in 2021. And I would also like to mention that my next report to the World Elder Abuse will focus on violence, abuse, and neglect, which will be launched in 2023, next September. The right to personal liberty is a core human right in older age. International human rights law gives the right to personal liberty and security without any distinction or discrimination. Places of detention include a variety of places where individuals may be deprived of liberty, such as prisons, pre-trial detention facilities, police stations, and social care establishments, psychiatric institutions, and hospital, mental health, and immigration detention centers. The right to personal liberty is not an absolute right, and persons can be deprived of it in circumstances clearly established under international human rights law. It is, however, considered arbitrary when unjustified, disproportionate, or discriminatory, or where due process has not been afforded. While examining the issue of older persons deprived of liberty, some underlying causes emerge from the situation of deprivation. The reasons vary from one context to another. It appears that ageism and age discrimination are underlying causes to most situations of deprivation of liberty. Ageist attitudes remain persistent worldwide and lead to discriminatory laws, policies, practices that hinder older persons' right to personal liberty. Gender discrimination intersecting with ageism has a particular unique and aggravated effect on the right to personal liberty of older women, as gender stereotypes and attitudes associated with the persistence of patriarchal norms do not disappear with older age. This may lead to and justify older women's unlawful deprivation of liberty. The Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls concluded in its 2019 thematic report that, I quote here, deprivation of liberty is deeply gendered. While there are many forms, they are all tied to causes rooted in discrimination against women. Such forms are based on harmful stereotypes created to belittle and silence them, punish them to be perceived as dangerous, and to overprotect them. Aging women may also be perceived as dangerous and to be controlled in some societies, resulting in forced confinement and banishment from their communities. The mere existence of witch camps and the confinement of older widows in safe places arise from such harmful gender stereotypes. The intersectionality between age and other factors require particular attention and specific consideration to ensure the needs of older persons. Disability is an additional risk factor for justifying the deprivation of liberty of certain groups of older women, and stigma and misconceptions are often the cause. It may result in involuntary commitment to mental health institutions, institutionalization for specialized care, as well as detention within the criminal justice as a result of diversion. The deprivation of liberty of older women with disabilities results in the failure by the state to protect their rights as guaranteed by CRPD. When incarcerated, older women and LGBTI persons may require special protection against violence. The number of older women in prisons are increasing, and they face several challenges that remain largely unaddressed by international human rights bodies. Due to the prevalence of ageist and sexist stereotypes and age discrimination within the criminal justice system, older women face heightened risk of discrimination, abuse, and violence at all stages of their incarceration. They also face difficulties in navigating the justice system, often due to the limited knowledge about their rights and the effective remedies, and the inaccessibility of the legal system. The lack of access to information and legal advice may increase the possibility of them being deprived of their liberty. Detention facilities need also to be rebuilt or adapted to the needs of older women, because they are often not designed to accommodate older persons and to respond to their needs as they are generally planned for younger detainees. Complications for older women usually arise from the prison layout and the detention conditions, such as climbing stairs, difficulties in accessing sanitary facilities, overcrowding, excessive heat or cold, noisy space, and other architectural features that may hinder those with physical and intellectual disabilities from satisfying their basic needs. I would like to suggest to member states to adapt their healthcare in prison, because older women and also transgender persons require specific genealogical, hygiene, and other gender-sensitive healthcare needs, and failure to provide for them many amount to ill treatment. Long-lasting incarceration increase the risk of older women losing social interaction, contact with the outside. During the COVID-19 pandemic, family visits were prohibited or limited, leading to some prisoners experiencing loneliness inside the detention facilities. I also call on member states and key stakeholders to change the stigma associated with criminal detention. The stigma may lead to exclusion from society. I thank you all for your attention, and also thank you for including me and giving me the opportunity to speak here also about older women deprived of liberty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for sharing about that important report. So we do have a few minutes, and I'll take the liberty being the moderator to ask one quick question to our panelists. I'm thinking about it because Claudia was talking, the independent expert was talking so much about these intersectionalities. How do you see other intersecting types of discrimination coming out in your work, and what might everyone tuning in want to keep in mind for their work when they think about older age and gender and elder abuse? Thank you.
Shall we take the floor?
Please.
Okay, so when I'm also thinking about the intersectionality and old age, I think poverty, for example, is a huge issue. Why violence against older persons very often is not detected and not supported. Many older women, especially if they're living in poverty, don't have the socioeconomic status and not enough education to know where to go and where to appeal to claim their rights. This is a huge issue, and from my perspective, this is also an intersecting factor which is not taken enough into account. I thank you for giving me the floor again.
And thank you to the independent expert. Would any other panelists like to share their thoughts on that? I can't see if anyone is interested online.
Claudia?
Oh, thank you. Okay. Please, Claudia.
Yeah,
the floor
I
is
would just add to what Claudia said. I would just add the issue of disabilities. We know that people and women in particular that experience disabilities also are at higher risk, as are migrant women and other groups. So obviously the intersection of age with poverty, disability, migrant status, and indigenous status in some countries is important when we're looking at risk factors. And we're also looking at how to strengthen the measurement of disabilities in the context of violence against women surveys, and obviously the two intersect at some point. So yeah, I would just add that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments from the other speakers? From Elsie, would you like to add anything? Okay. Please go ahead.
I would just want to take a time to promote the Intervention Accelerator again. This is very important because we need because the Intervention Accelerator would help us consolidate evidence from the past decade on effective intervention of elder abuse. And it will help us identify effective components in this intervention and will inform us about the way forward in the coming decade. So I hope colleagues will support this. Yeah, that's from me.
Thanks, Elsie. So it could be an opportunity to learn even more. Well, with that, we can. Is there anyone from the floor that would like to ask a question? Three in the back. Okay, I can't see. Okay, the person closest to me, please.
Hello, thank you so much for organizing this panel. It's been very interesting to hear. My name is Elena. I work for the Global Fund for Widows. We work with women who suffer a triple discrimination. When we were talking about intersecting discrimination, we see ageism, sexism, and widowhood. When these women become widows, they are disinherited. They suffer harmful traditional practices that are often linked to sexual abuse, and they become destitute. So I wanted to ask if any of your studies or initiatives are addressing this issue. Thank you.
Maybe I can say something.
Thank you.
When we did the scoping review on qualitative evidence around elder abuse of women, we were specifically looking for some of these forms of abuse that maybe are not very well documented. And it was very difficult to find any data. You know, we look. I mean, we are aware of the issues around being accused of witchcraft in some settings. There are issues of widows in other settings, and this is yet another gap that this data on some perhaps very context-specific forms of discrimination and abuse that seem to particularly affect older women are not very well documented. So it would be very interesting if you have data on this to have an exchange on this.
Could I just add a word in relation to this topic?
Please. Thank you, Christopher.
Yes. What I say is part of the identification of promising interventions for this intervention accelerator, our colleagues in Burkina Faso, whose name is George Rwamba, he teaches at the university in Ouagadougou, is doing a sub-project specifically on accusations of witchcraft, the prevalence of such accusations, the responses being taken in different countries in West Africa, Southern Africa, East Africa, etc. And hopefully, once this sub-project is finished, we should have some more data on this particular issue.
Thanks very much, Christopher. I would only add on this point that this is a particularly interesting nexus of types of abuse against older women because it exists in practice, but in many cases it also exists in the law. And so to answer the question about where there might be more data, Human Rights Watch has conducted some research on this particular topic, looking at specifically at property rights and how they can better be protected, because there have been studies in sub-Saharan Africa that have shown that in those particular contexts, at least, the greatest predictor for a witchcraft allegation is owning property.
One person of red.
Yes,
jacket,
okay. In the red, please.
Really, we have only 50 minutes.
Hello. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. My name is Burcu from Turkey. I work as a head of department at the Ministry of Family and Social Services. Actually, I would like to thank all the panelists for this very important informations, because currently Turkey is conducting a survey on the profile of older persons. We just began to study the questionnaire, and we plan to publish the results in March next year. So all the informations from the panelists was very useful to me. And I would like to ask if what will be your suggestions to us as it's not specifically on an elder abuse, but we plan to have a module on elder abuse and violence. So what will be your most important suggestion to us?
Thank you, Borja. We'll look forward to that. Would anyone from the panel like to take that question?
We would be happy to share our module with you, and to look with you as to whether and how it could fit into your larger survey. One of the challenges always is that we know that the more specific acts we ask about, and the more specifically that we can ask, we are more likely to have to capture the true prevalence than if we just ask a single question. So I suppose my recommendation would be that if you are going to explore elder abuse or elder abuse against women, that you include a sufficient set of questions that will give you, if not the real prevalence, at least something that is a little bit more reliable than just asking one or two, broad questions. And we can share methodological guidance and actually put you in contact also with the people in Turkey who've done the Violence Against Women survey, if you're not in touch with them already.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we are going to need to close out the session so that we can vacate the room on time. I'd like to give the last word to Susan Summers, the Secretary General of the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. Thank you, Susan.
Well, thank you very much, Bethany, and thanks to everybody. Thanks to the panelists, and in particular to Ambassador Skeff, who we value your friendship and your support, not only here today at the Open-Ended Working Group and also on the status of women, the Commission on the Status of Women, because your office has always been open to us and listening to us with regards to the issues of older women. If we had longer time, I would read some portions of the statement we made this year at the Commission on the Status of Women, which reiterates a lot of what the ambassador said earlier and the independent expert with regards to the intersectionality between aging and gender, the need for data collection, results, and analysis, and that the governments themselves need to show more political will. And I think that's the big takeaway that we need to get to our governments. It's been 75 years since Argentina recognized the need to protect the rights of older persons, and I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the council. The drafting committee at that time for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights made a big mistake in sort of dissing and not paying attention to Argentina's request for this, or we might have 75 years of rights for older persons. We can't wait any longer. The time is now to double efforts to get the elements for a new convention, to work together to reach the conclusion of a binding international instrument to protect the human rights of older persons. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bethany. Wonderful job. And thank you, Rio. And thank you.
Thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to all of the participants online. And now I must ask everyone to continue the conversation in the hallway. Let's promptly make our way from the room. Thank you. Bye-bye.